Check out all your parts. Okay, let's cut the parts off. Let's start with our vertical. We're just using a regular old hacksaw blade. Alright, this is our elevator cap. The foam cuts real nice. Another elevator cap. Alright, there's our stick hand. Notice how we're cutting right next to the foam there. Alright, there's our line. We cut right there, and all we have to do now is just shape the arm. A little bit of sanding, we'll have a cool looking hand. Alright, let's cut the fill channels off our elevators. Careful you don't dig down too deep, because you're going to end up sanding it. We're using a 60 grit block with 120 on the other side. Cut all the fill channels off our ventrals. And now let's clean everything up. And be real careful, don't change the shape here. That foam cuts real fast. Alright, any flash we have on the fuselage, let's go ahead and get rid of that. Just a real light sanding. Alright, on the flat side of the fuselage, let's sand that up. We want that nice and smooth. Doesn't take much, just a little dab will do ya. Alright, these are our fuselage leveling blocks. Be real careful of these. Don't sand them off and don't cut them off. It's going to level up the fuselage later. Those are our wing leveling blocks. Don't cut those off either. Alright, using a torch and a hot wire, we got to melt some holes through the foam for our cables and our servo wire. Have a fan going for the smoke, as the smoke is kind of nasty. You got to be careful. You might want to test on some scrap foam because this foam cuts pretty fast. Okay, this is for our fuel lines for later. We're working on the right side fuselage. We're going to melt all our holes right now so we don't have to mess with it later. Alright, melt them through for the cables on the other side of the fuselage. Alright, this is our rudder channel. If you just get close, you're going to be in there good enough. Kind of just melt it all out. Alright, let's cut off our fill channels for our air brakes. Note there is a left and a right side for these air brakes. Kind of clean them up. Alright, using 5-minute epoxy, let's epoxy these things on. Use a ruler on both sides. Flatten it up and it'll be on. Okay, mark your center for your elevator and your aileron torque rods. Alright, check out this carbon fiber. This is some nice stuff. We got some Spectra string here also. Alright, that stuff is nice. Using your ruler, cut off some elevator strips and some aileron strips. Alright, using a 1/8 piece of brass, we're going to sharpen that sucker up with the X-Acto knife. And this is the large one for the elevator. That size is a 13/32. Alright. This is going to turn into a carbon epoxy bearing. We're going to build this plane tough, folks. Okay, using 5-minute epoxy. Let's spread some of that on the bearing here. Kind of squish it down real good. You want to get in between those fibers. Okay, place that over the hole that you marked earlier. That'll also lock in our air brake. Okay, we put them on our aileron holes. And now we can drill through our aileron. And using that brass piece, we'll drill through halfway on one side and halfway on the other side. Alright, heat up a scrap piece of 256 wire. Well, you don't want to get it too hot. What we're going to do is make a little channel in there right next to it, only about an 1/8 inch wide. And we're going to fill that later with epoxy. That's going to make our bearing attach right next to the carbon fiber. It's going to spread that load out. Okay, using the diagrams, let's make our torque rods. We're going to make our rudder torque rod right now. We're using the 440 wire, a brass tube, and an aileron connector. We're going to fit our brass over. We're going to make our other bend here. Wire is fairly easy to bend. Look at there. Not bad, huh? Make a mark. And use your cutters and cut it. Now you have a custom rudder rod. Alright, let's make our aileron torque rods. Make 2 of those. Okay, we're going to make our elevator rod. The elevator tube is out of 3/8. Let's drill a hole. Push our 1 3/4 bolt through. And we'll secure the nut. Don't tighten it down real tight. Okay, we cut ourselves from the 13/32 brass a little tiny sleeve just to hold our thrust washer in place. You can see we got a mark on that elevator there. Alright, let's solder up the nut and the bolt. And let's solder that sleeve to our thrust washer. Get a good solder. Make sure everything's sitting just the way it's supposed to. If not, get a pair of pliers and straighten it out. There's our elevator rod. Alright, we got to drill this out a little bit. Alright. Let's drop our elevator rod in there. Since that size was drilled out, it should just fall in and fall out. Alright. Let's add a little grease to our thrust washer there. And to the elevator tube there, right in the end there. Smear it all over because we're going to pour epoxy on this later. Okay, we got our rods plus our 13/32 rods that go in there halfway in the fuselage. And let's push our 3/8 rod elevator rod in there. Now that brass rod on the outside will center us up in there, using that carbon fiber as a path. Alright, we used 5-minute epoxy and a little bit of baby powder here. And we're just going to drip it on right next to our bearing, our thrust washer there. This is going to give us one of the most awesome bearings. Alright, push that in till it stops, and then let's just wipe off the excess. You're now, for the most part, done with this side, as far as the elevator goes. Alright, let that dry, and let's work on our ailerons. Grease your rod up, the entire rod, and go ahead and get your brass tube, put it over that 440 rod. Alright, we're going to use a little 5-minute epoxy again, spread it on your aileron carbon fiber. Go ahead and slip that over your aileron and fit that right in the hole that we drilled earlier. And there we go. Make sure that thing comes out real nice and straight. And just a little bit of brass there will be hanging out. Alright, let's break our elevator rod loose. And we'll take off that outer brass. Okay, we're going to heat this up. And we're going to make it so we can drip some epoxy in there. So just go right where our bearing was, or our cutout earlier. Okay, just make a little slice there. We're going to fill that whole area up with 5-minute epoxy. You may need to heat the epoxy up so it flows real nice. Alright, let this dry. Okay, once it's been drying for about 15 minutes, let's break it free. You can add a little oil on there so it slips real nice. You now have a perfect fit carbon fiber epoxy bearing. Add just a little bit of oil. We don't want to drip too much in there. Look at that. That's going to be nice and smooth and tight. Okay, get a couple of small pieces of carbon fiber. And we're going to put it right underneath where our torque rods are going to go for our rudder. Okay, we had waxed up our rudder torque rod, and now we're going to put a little epoxy on there. And drop it in right next to the carbon fiber there. You can dab a little epoxy in there, but not too much, just to lock it in. We'll later put carbon on the other side, and that'll really make that thing solid. Okay, we got our all threads. We're going to conserve and cut them in half. Hook up your nyrod, your clears, in a snap link. And solder one end to your steel cable